So,
I'm about the hour outside Richmond.
okay, all right. I haven't been up in that area. I need to get up there, but I always love the tagline when I see the license plate because Virginia is for lovers, right?
Yes, right, right. That's exactly right.
So when I see it, I'm like, man, how did they fetch that logo? I mean, that's pretty
I don't
big,
know. I mean, living here as long as I have, I'm sure that saying is true for some,
right?
but we have some knuckleheads around here too. So I'm not sure if everybody loves all Virginians.
I think that can be all spread out throughout the country.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, man, it's great to meet you, and there's so much going on in your world. So I want to begin the very first question by asking you, looking at the calendar now, it's the 4-year anniversary of this pandemic. How did you survive the pandemic, and how did it subsequently change you?
Well, I'm a recently retired high school principal, number one, and so the pandemic had a an effect on not only me but my entire community because we had to change the way we actually ran school.
Yeah.
I remember the very first year of the pandemic, excuse me, when the pandemic hit. It was March, I believe, of 2019, maybe,
2020.
and
Yeah.
2020,
Yeah.
but it was March.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And the crazy part about it was we still had about 2 months left to go in school. I got a call from my superintendent saying that, well, school is out indefinitely as of today. And so to have to get ready for that announcement, to prepare the kids for that, you have about maybe an hour and a half lead time to prepare the kids and the staff for the fact that we won't be returning to the building for the rest of the year. And I would love to be able to tell you what my plan is, but I don't know what our plan is yet. So stay tuned on the social media, on the phones, letters, what have you. And Mr. Williams will tell you exactly how we're going to proceed for the rest of the year. So we started off with that. And we really kind of didn't proceed for the rest of the year. Pretty much in the state of Virginia, what happened is whatever grade you had as a student on the day that the governor decided to close schools when the pandemic started, that's the grade you had for the rest of the year. And you just go into the new year, starting fresh with a new grade.
Yeah.
So over that summer, that's where it got to be difficult because we knew then we would have to prepare for distancing and social distancing. And at first, it was very um, intense because there weren't kids were not even allowed to be in schools. So what we had to do is set up what they call Google Classrooms, where teachers would connect with students through their computers, those that had computers, because at that time, the area where I was principal was kind of a semi-rural area.
Yeah.
And so certain people had access to home computers, but other people didn't. So we had to then teachers had to create tapes and discs to be able to send to folks from at home or create packages, work packets, and have a time set aside every day to have individual phone conferences with teachers. That whole thing was out of hand,
Yeah.
but we pulled it off. We did it, and the kids would. It'd be interesting to see the kids in the morning. Some of the kids would be leave their screens off because they didn't want to let you know that they were in their pajamas in the morning, taking their classes. But it was kind of fun in the fact that they got to see their principal kind of join in on a Zoom / Google Meet meeting with them and kind of watch their classes and see how things were going and discuss things with them about their lives and what was happening, what have you. And even though we didn't have kids in the building, we still had to offer lunch. So what we did was we set up different posts throughout the community where different principals from different schools in the district would be there with bagged lunches. And then parents would come by and pick up the lunches for the students and take the lunches home. And any questions they had for us about curriculum, about assignments, what have you, during that time, we would try to answer them then, aside from phone calls and social media and other things. So after a while, that subsided, but we still had to deal with social distancing. And so we created a schedule where there would be A days and B days. One half of the county would come to school in person on Mondays and Wednesdays. The other half of the county would come to school on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Yeah.
Fridays would be what we call a deep cleaning day, where the custodians spent the whole day just kind of wiping everything down and keeping everything clean as best they could. And so we did our distancing that way. Um, and so when kids were not in the building, they could then call their teachers via phone or by computer to get help on work or what have you. It was an amazing ordeal because it was a strain on our teachers, but God bless them. They did everything they could to make it work. And I will never forget the dedication they showed to our students over those 2 years. It was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And so it got to the point, even at the end of that year, that second year, where we had to have separate graduations. So we had an A-day graduation and a B-day graduation. The A-day graduation was from 9 to 11. The B-day graduation was from noon to 2.
Yeah.
And it's just, I mean, there are a whole lot of other details that went into it, but it was just one of those things that if you were an educator, especially in one of the states that was taking the pandemic seriously, you had to be very creative.
Uh-huh.
You had to be very flexible. You had to make sure you had a good relationship with your community, because if you don't, it's not going to work.
Yep.
And so, just God bless the people of, my students and their parents. And it worked out. And we're just glad about it, because the kids were still educated. I'm sure it wasn't as effective a school year or effective a group of school years as we would have liked as educators. But we got it done
Yeah.
in the face of some very daunting circumstances. So.
You brought a lot of memories back because I work IT for a school district and I was there at that time and I remember all of those things. And it all melted together and I kind of forgot about the lunches because that was a big deal. We did the same thing. We're in a place called Grandview, just outside of Kansas City, Missouri, and there is a lot of the population that don't have the devices or Wi-Fi access and food and all of that. So wow, there was so much that went into trying to make that machine go. And there was a lot of people that really did good doing that. So right now in 2024, if I put you in front of a bunch of third graders at career day and one of the kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer them right now?
Well, I'm a recently retired principal, but if I were still a principal at that point, I said I have a job which is probably uh, one of the best jobs in the world. I get to see young people develop and grow intellectually and academically in terms of the way they think and in terms of how much knowledge they amass. Um, it's a job where sometimes you have to be very, very understanding and know where uh, know the backgrounds of certain students and know what they're dealing with at home as well as in school. And you have to kind of modify things with regards to how you work with them based on what their life is outside of school. But it's a chance to really help people learn and grow. And when I think of the kids down the line that I've worked with, and I see them 5, 10, 15 years later as adults, as entrepreneurs, as moms, as dads, as bosses, as executives, as truck drivers, as policemen, as prison guards, even some of them. It varies, and it's just a wonderful feeling to know that you had some small part to play in that adult's development, especially those adults who are making positive contributions to society.
So what did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream to grow up and become?
I wanted to be everything.
Yeah.
When I was in the First of all, when I was in the third grade, I was a child actor.
Yeah.
So I started at the age of 5 doing commercials, Jello pudding commercials. The very first Jello pudding commercial with Bill Cosby. I was a little black kid sitting next to him, laughing like a crazy person. The very first back to school campaign for Fruit of the Loom underwear.
Yeah.
I was the original Purple Grade back in 1974.
Wow.
And so I did those commercials. I also did Scope mouthwash and Kentucky Fried Chicken, Johnson's Baby Powder. The list goes on and on. So at that point, I was, fully engrossed in the whole acting thing. But in the back of my mind, actor is not what I want to be when I got to be an adult. I still wanted to be a fireman. That was my big thing. I want to be a fireman.
Yeah.
I want to be a firefighter, but that didn't quite work out. And now knowing what I know about how difficult that job is, it probably wasn't the best choice for me. You learn as you grow, and you
Yeah.
and you find out that what you end up doing is probably what you were meant to do.
So how did you evolve to from being a child actor to becoming a principal? How did all of the seeds become who you are today?
Well, it's very interesting. First of all, my parents were both educators, God rest their souls. Um, And so it really wasn't an option. I think it was kind of in my blood. So my late father, Dr. Eugene Williams Sr., was a middle school English teacher, and then he was a principal of a high school, and then he was the dean of Sojourner Douglas College. At one time, he was a professor at Howard University. His final job, one of his final jobs before moving on to retirement, was the director of test score improvement for Washington, D.C. public schools. My mom was an English teacher by trade. One of her last jobs before retirement was she was the language arts coordinator, the regional language arts coordinator for Miami-Dade public schools. So it was just a part of who I was. I'd grown up in classrooms, sitting in the back of my father's lectures with my, my crayons and my coloring books, sitting in the back of my mom's classes, kind of, in fact, people don't know this, but when I was in high school, after I finished my homework, one of my assignments, on occasion, were to help my mom grade papers of her middle school students. And that was fun. That was a blast, and that gave me the impetus that I needed to realize, oh, I could do this teaching thing, this education thing. And I like young people. I like young people. My young colleagues when I was that age, and even as I got older, just the energy that young people give you, whether it's age 3 or age 13 or 18, it's just a great thing. So it was just part of who I was, and I kind of just fell into it. I kind of stumbled into it. It wasn't really what I had planned on doing, but I got out of college, and I had to have a job of some sort. And so the first job I had out of college, I was working as a substitute teacher in DC public schools for a summer school program, and working as an SAT tutor for Kaplan, the company called Kaplan. That was great because I would do that during the day, and at night I was a singing waiter on a cruise ship called the Spirit of Washington.
Wow.
And so that kind of lended itself to a lot, me using my talents in a lot of different ways. Moved from there, became worked for a nonprofit called Funds for the Community's Future. Worked with underserved neighborhoods in DC, pairing them with companies, and the companies and the communities work together to create fundraisers. And whatever funds that the communities raised, the companies would match 2 to 1, and those funds would be used to provide scholarships for the local DC public schools students who are graduating. Did that for a while. Then I worked for Sylvan Learning Systems for a while as a center director. And I enjoyed that part of it because it mixed corporate with public education. But then sometimes you get too corporate and you forget what you're there to do. I said, it's time for me to get out of corporate and work with actual kids in the classroom. Yeah. And so I actually started my teaching career in 1996, I believe, in Prince George's County, Maryland, at Crossland High School. My wife and I worked there together. We were, crazy story, we were engaged, and we didn't know we were going to end up working together. She applied for a job at one school, and I applied for a job at another school. As it worked out, our placements had been changed. And I knew that I was going to Crossland High School, but I didn't know where she was going. And so she called me one night, said, Gene, guess where I'm going? I said, where? I'm going to Crossland High School. Where are you going? I said, I'm going to Crossland High School too, dear. And so we taught next to each other for a whole year. Her class was one room down from mine, as an engaged couple. And nobody knew that we were engaged. At that time, she was Miss White and I was Mr. Williams. And we kept our relationship on the job very cordial, very professional. The kids didn't know that we were engaged. Our colleagues didn't know, because we thought that was the best way to do things. And so it was crazy in October when we got married, and my principal was talking to both of us. And she said, isn't it so exciting? I got 2 young teachers that are both getting married the same month, the same weekend. That is crazy. You guys got married on October. This is fantastic. And she said, and isn't it wild, Mrs. Williams, because you were Miss White and you came back from your wedding as Miss Williams, and you have Mr. Williams working right next to you. Isn't it wild to have 2 Williamses working together? And we just kept looking at each other like, she really doesn't get it, does she? She really doesn't know. And then we finally admitted to her, yeah, we both got married on that same day, that same weekend, and we got married to each other.
Wow.
You didn't tell us why. We went through the whole year. We didn't feel it was anybody's business. You know, I like to keep things professional, keep things private.
Yeah.
And I've always kind of been that way with regards to working.
Yeah.
And so that's how it worked out. So that was
Wild.
a funny story.
That's very wild. Yeah, my wife is a fifth grade teacher in the school district, and we met years ago and went through changes in our lives, and we ended up getting married, and we tried really hard. But the kids, when I'd walk in the room, they knew it. They feel it, they sense it. And to this day, they're all older, they're all waving at me, and it's just kind of a part of what we do now. So let me ask you this. Who's been a hero for you in your life? Who's been an inspiration that's helped you excel and be who you are?
I've had so many. Um, you know, I want to kind of piggyback on the last question you asked me though
Yeah.
to bring to this. So after I had a career in classroom of about, let's say, because I worked in Maryland. I worked for a few years as a teacher at a charter school in Washington, D.C. And then I worked as a teacher in my dad's hometown of Orange, Virginia. So I've been teaching in the classroom for about 10 years. And at that point, I decided to go into administration. And then I was able to get my admin degree and become what's called the administrative intern, which is basically uh, admin duties for teacher pay. Did that for 2 years. Then became an assistant principal on the middle school level for 3 years, on the high school level for 7 years. And then most recently, my last job as an educator was the 5 years I spent as a high school principal in Farmville, Virginia.
Wonderful. So who has been that inspiration for you?
But those inspirations have been many. First of all, it might sound corny, it might sound crazy, but my mother and father,
Hmm.
um, they were tremendous inspirations because they were people. My father was one of 9 children from rural Virginia. One of the families that they were poor, but they didn't know it
Yeah.
because that's what they had grown up around, and they lived life to the fullest. And all of my uncles are now gone, but it was one of those situations where I worked with a father who was constantly giving me sage advice, a father who never wanted me to make the same mistakes he did. So at times he butted heads because I wish he would kind of let me make some of my own mistakes. But as now that he's gone, I realize, what he was trying to do. My mother was supportive in everything I did. She came from the Liberty City portion of Miami, Florida. You know anything about Miami, Florida? That at that time when she was growing up, it was a predominantly black working class area to live, and she was the first. Both my parents were the first people in their families to go to college. They both became educators, and so my mother was just a supporter. Just whatever I did was like manna from God. She just thought it was if I spoke, if I wrote, if I sang, whatever I was into, she was my biggest supporter. Now, to her credit though, when I messed up, she knew how to keep me mentally where I needed to be and keep me in check when my head was getting too big for what I was trying to do. So I miss them both greatly. Um, Another influence of mine was I worked on a movie when I believe I was in third or fourth grade called The Man Who Loved the Stars. And it was about the life of Benjamin Banneker. And I was a co-star with the late Ossie Davis. And so the lessons he taught me in terms of, especially being an actor, professionalism, how to carry yourself, get to the set on time, prepare, in these ways, know your material, have a background knowledge of it before you even get on the set. Be aware of who you're working with and the different styles that your actors have around you and how they prepare. All those things. That was tremendously helpful to me, and not only at that point, but in other things I did later on in my acting career. Um, some people are going to be upset about this, and I understand why. This next person I'm going to say, and I understand why it's going to rub some people the wrong way, but I'm a person who believes that everybody is better than their worst act.
Yeah.
So I'll have to say Bill Cosby,
Yeah.
um, because at that point he was I worked with him as my first national commercial at the age of 5. And I'd only done one commercial before that, which was a local Utz potato chip commercial in
Yeah.
Washington, D.C. And my very next commercial was a national commercial with a man who at that time was one of the major stars in the country, in the world, Bill Cosby. And to learn from him about comedic timing, to hear his stories. And when I combine that with the fact that as a young child, you know, at a time when there weren't that many positive Black role models on television, I could look at him and see I Spy. I could look at him and see Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids. I could see him on the Electric Company. I could see him on Captain Kangaroo. I could see him on all these different shows. And then I would watch his specials where he talked about the education of young Black men and gave an actual Black history or actual African history that was different than what I was learning in school. Back in those days, there was very limited knowledge about Africa, and what they taught you was kind of based on what you saw in movies.
Yeah.
And I knew even at that age, I said, we're more than Tarzan's flunkies. You know what I'm saying? I mean, African culture is greater than that.
Yeah.
And so to be around a man, not only who was achieving in terms of his career as a celebrity, but also had his doctorate degree. It was just, he was a major influence for me. Like I said, things that happened to him later on in life, I was as appalled by them as anyone else. But I think anybody, especially any African American, who denies the importance that Bill Cosby um, infused into the culture in terms of his relevance, is just is fooling themselves. You can't talk about modern African American history and I have a Bill Cosby chapter
Right.
in my estimation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely. So of all of these things that you've done in your life, what are you the proudest of?
raising my daughter.
Yeah.
I have a 25-year-old daughter, and she is a teacher. And she is my pride and joy. I mean, and the wisdom that she showed at a very young age. I would like to say I raised her, but in many ways she raised me and her mom, because she's an old soul. She can look at a person. She has that's this talent where she can look at a person right away and say, "Stay away from him. Talk to her." She could just do that,
Yeah.
you know. And I used to, even as a child, she had that, and people would mistake that for her being standoffish or not wanting to be communicative. Wasn't that
Yeah.
at all?
Yeah.
Because the people she loves, she'll talk your ear off, to, and the
Yeah.
ones that she's suspicious of, she kind of feeds them with a long-handled spoon, and I like that about her. I love that about her.
So you're such a busy guy. You've lived so many colorful parts of your life, and you've been an educator and you've done all these things. What are you doing now? What's happening? You don't seem the retirement type.
Well, right now I'm in the course of transitioning. I'm starting to get into public speaking, keynote addresses, organizations, staff development in terms of working with schools about how to improve student vocabulary. As an English teacher, I'm big on improving student vocabulary because I believe that a student's knowledge of words affects not only his vocabulary, but his writing and his reading skills and overall ability to express oneself. So I'm working on that. I'm working with young African American males, trying to get more school systems to encourage their academically motivated African American males to have a higher enrollment in advanced placement courses, honors courses, courses, courses where the kids can actually be exposed to greater levels of rigor. And so that's what I'm spending my time doing now. I'm feeling I'll always be an educator at heart.
Yeah.
Um, and I've even gone back to now recently doing some tutoring again on my own time of little ones,
Yeah.
reading tutoring. So go back and kind of get those muscles working again in terms of digraphs and phonemes and phonics and short vowel sounds, and then going on to sentence completion and inferences and main idea and all those concepts that help people become excellent readers and excellent gatherers of information.
So everyone out there has a perception of you. There's all these people that exist in your world, family, friends, clients, everyone that's known you in an educational setting, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I'm a guy who wants everybody around me to do well. I'm a person who believes in fairness. I'm a person who believes in being honest with oneself. Um, One of the things that some people like about me and other people don't like about me is I can see all sides of a situation. I like to put myself in different positions and understand where people are coming from when they're talking, which I think is especially valuable quality to have right now with the political climate being what it is. There are certain politicians and certain ways of thinking that I do not agree with, but I understand why those things prevail. I understand why they exist. Um, and so to just kind of uh, castigate people and just blow them off because they don't see things the way you do, as opposed to trying to figure out what about their life experiences got them to that point to believe what they believe, I think you're doing everybody a disservice and it doesn't help grow the conversation.
Yeah, I agree. So let's say you have a dream tonight. You ran into that actor child that you were, and you could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on the life you've led, the wisdom you've gained. What advice would you impart on that young version of you?
Don't procrastinate. When opportunities come your way, jump on them as quickly as possible because you never know when they're going to come again. And if you don't do that, the work that you have to put in order for them to come back around can be very stressful. And it would have been easier just for you to just jump on it the first time it came into your path. So that would be the advice I would give.
So let's say a time machine pulls up in front of your house when we get off this call, and you can go anywhere in history and see one event. Where are you going? What would you love to see with your own eyes?
Now, does it have to be something I've already seen or something that I've never seen?
I don't know. We can open up to doors to both.
If I had to go back in time, what I would love to do is go back in time to an event that I attended with my father, the Million Man March.
Yeah.
That was probably, for me as a Black American male, one of the most fantastic days I've ever spent in my own skin.
Wow.
To see African American males together by the hundreds of thousands in from all walks of life. You had doctors, lawyers, janitors, hustlers, actors, college students, um, elderly people, little kids, rich, poor, middle class, and everything in between. Everything from the country club to the hood, all of it in the same place with the same focus, the same goal, which is the overall growth and improvement of our young Black men and our old Black men and Black men of any age, and to appreciate uh, the chance to sit down with these folks and stand with these folks and hear their stories and where they came from and what they went through, and realize that every African American male story is unique and different, but at the same time, it's exactly the same. That's the craziest thing for me about being a Black man in America is every story is like a snowflake, completely different.
Yeah.
But there's some basic commonalities that we can all say, yep, uh-huh, that happened to me.
Yeah.
Especially if you're past a certain age.
Sure.
Maybe from birth to maybe 10 or 11, maybe not so much, but once you get into teenage years and
Yeah.
up through being a grown person, so many common situations that we all can say, whether we're from Connecticut or South Carolina or Arizona or Louisiana, all over the country, you can say, yep, those things happen to me too.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to reach out, learn more about you, anything about your world, where's the best place to go?
EugeneWilliamsJr.com.
Okay. One-stop shop.
EugeneWilliamsJr.com. That's one. I also give a lot of opinions about the current state of education on my Instagram page, EUGWILLJR. Yes, that's another place. And then, of course, there's on TikTok, Eugene Williams Jr.
Right on. Eugene, what a wonderful story. Thank you, sir. Thank you for opening up. Keep
Thank you for
spreading
having
the
me.
good work. Yes, sir. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Appreciate you, man.
Thank you. Best of luck.